Hey guys, welcome to the discussion section of our work on the denial of death. I just read a little mini essay that I made. That was the first part of this, and this is the second part where I talk about it with my two friends. Yeah, so the denial of death by Ernest Becker. It's a lot. It's a lot. I guess again this is how I started off my essay, right? That his to put the book in one sentence, Becker argues that much of human civilization, its culture and achievements, can be understood as a symbolic defense mechanism against the knowledge of our mortality. And my favorite idea from the book is interpreting modern day culture as having a similar function as religion, where where when man didn't have the scientific knowledge to be so skeptical of religion a few hundred years ago, he could have faith in an afterlife or which served as this immortality quest. However, now that we do have this like scientific knowledge that makes it so that my generation and even the boomers, can't it makes it harder for us to truthfully believe in religion and use that as our like immortality um, solution, right? Um, yeah, so that's one thing. Yeah, I'll hand it over to you guys. So how should we start this off? You guys have read the Denial of Death
Mm-hmm.
before I have.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about the key aspects of this book that are more that were the most meaningful to you, that that stick out in your memory, because it's a lot of pages. You don't have 250 pages in your brain. Your memory picked out a few of those ideas that subconsciously thought these are worth remembering.
So,
So tell me what your subconscious told you was worth remembering.
so I'm gonna let you talk about that first, but I just want to a little bit of background. So I met Monte right here first, and Monte was friends with Nicholas, and so I met Nicholas after meeting Monte very shortly. And the first night I met this guy, he told me about this book. Our first conversation was about this book, and yeah, it was a great book. And then I just want to give a little bit of that background, but I'm gonna let Monty talk about it first, as he's been the one who kind of found out about this book and let us know about it. So, to you, Monty. Yeah.
Yes, so I find The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker to be one of the greatest books of all time. I believe in the preface or the foreword to the book, one of the two, it mentions how the insights of this book are, if we're ever going to take the angst of human civilization and use it to fight a war against the natural evils of the world, like sickness, disease, poverty, and energy usage, etc., just then more take all the anger and map it out for this like pragmatic kind of needed aspect of coordination. That this book would be a part of it, and that really stands out to me. I've read the book probably about 10 to 15 times, at least, and listened to. I probably many more times than that. I'm probably at like 30. I'm being honest. I think all of our leaders should understand this book. In Becker's other book that was published after his passing, he mentions how in his utopian visions and fantasies, that all the leaders would be well analyzed men who were actively aware of their mortality and or agents of humanity and not of poorly functioning repression mechanisms in terms of one's character armor. So that's my thoughts initially. Nicholas?
Sounds like the Philosopher King from Plato. But
Yeah.
so Monty, why have you read this book 35 times? I know you were underestimating it to make you seem okay, but to seem you like to make it look like he's like mentally healthy. But yeah. So why have you read this book like 10 times?
Well, according to the definition of mental health in the book, I would fit that quite adeptly. In terms of your banter right there. But I've read this book many times because it provides the most concise, penetrating insights into the human condition that are needed for, one, understanding it, and two, engineering solutions that factor it in. So I don't see... What was that?
What?
I just said something and then balloons popped up to the top of the screen.
I don't know. Whatever.
Interesting. Very interesting. Anyways, yeah, that's his the best. Like you need the insights of Becker if you're going to be someone who can actually be an agent of the human condition.
So, yeah. And then I'll now tell about my experience with it. So as I said, Monte introduced me to this book, and quite literally the first conversation, he said, "You should read this book." And I had no idea about it, but a year or two prior to that, I had been kind of in a pit of the abyss, I guess, of existential angst, and not really sure what to do with my life, and not really sure not sure what to make of anything, and I remember always as like a 21-year-old having not looked at this book or deeply into any books, I guess. I always wondered about certain things, and one of them was why no one seemed to talk about death. As Obama says, right, it's like death and taxes are the two facts of life, or whatever the quote is, I don't know. But, of course, everyone talks about taxes, but, and then you get, I'm like, well, why? I would always say, I was like, well, why is nobody talking about this, right? Like, it's the one thing that, we don't understand, first of all, and then, but it's true, it's a fact. And there are many facts, but you know what I mean. And so I was wondering about, always kind of mad at myself and mad at everyone that they weren't talking about the things that I believed we should be talking about. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. And it kind of made me alleviate myself, or whatever the word is, from talking to people, from society. And so I kind of went further and further into myself, into these like weird thoughts of like just existential angst is what you could call it. And then, I read this book. I listened to it first, and then I would go on to read it. I probably listened and read to it about 4 or 5 times by now. So a lot less than Sir Monte here, but I've looked at it a good bit. And as me and Nicholas talked about off camera, he as books do, you have all these thoughts in your head that are kind of just like roaming about. They're not really clear. They're not really sentences or anything. And then for Becker, I had a bunch of those, and he seemed to put to words a lot of those things that I had in my head but couldn't quite make out. And so he really helped me kind of understand myself and what I was questioning and thinking, and he, because he does a beautiful job of taking what people of the past, like Freud and Kierkegaard and all these arguably the best thinkers of all human civilization, arguably. And he takes some of them and he puts together and concisely states what they were thinking and how it mixes and matches with what another person was thinking and what Becker thinks of it. And it kind of made more sense to me why I was so upset, and even why some people don't talk about it. Because that was a big thing that I kind of realized. It's like some people might not want to talk about it, but some people might not be able to talk about it. Just as I was not able to really talk about it, even though I wanted to talk about it. And he put to words a lot of, just to conclude, he puts to words a lot of things that I wasn't able to put to words myself, and I think that's really helped me with my own thought and understanding of the world.
Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, my favorite, my most impactful nonfiction books usually start with an intuition that I already have, but then they like develop this intuition for like 200 pages, right? Which is great, which is kind of like the utility of a book. But so I want to go back to what stuff that both of you guys said, but I'm gonna start with Luke since that's the freshest.
Sure.
Yeah, so you mentioned that people generally don't talk about death.
Yeah.
I do agree. However, like since death is oh damn, I don't even know how to describe it. Since death is like the ultimate end that every human in the past has faced. Like literally every human in like the 19th century has got it, right? And every single century before.
I saw somewhere all humans to have ever lived are either dead or dying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much it.
But I do think that people do talk about death. However, since it's such a sensitive and deep topic, it's within it's I don't think saying it's ritualized is the correct way to saying it, but it is
Like a taboo, maybe in a way.
well, it's uncomfortable, and at least in my experience, I do talk about the death of significant people in my life or in the life of others with like, my dad, right, my immediate family, or my close friends. However, it's obviously not a topic that you can talk about with acquaintances, right? Or at least if you want to, stay in as like a socially normal person, right? You can also just be like edgy and stuff and be like, hey guy, let's talk about death.
It's not a good pickup line.
It's not.
Trust me.
Yes, we believe you. But yeah, so I guess my response to what you said is that death and sports are two different topics, right? You can talk about sports with acquaintances, but you can't talk about death with them. You can talk about death with family and close friends. In my experience. Any comments on that? Or?
Yeah, I would say that's a good way to put it. And I've never used it as a pickup line, but I always would, I guess, treat it as something like sports. And I would treat it as sports and find, like you just said, that it just doesn't work for any number of reasons. But it sucks because I think maybe for us three, and then for a lot of people, maybe everyone, is that it's always there, or at least you find yourself thinking about it, at some point in time, and for others you think about it more, and for others less. But I think realizing that and being able to find a book, and there's many books on death, of course, but to find a book, I think with this, for me, it was like he talks about death, but he doesn't really give any answers about it. Like you read the Bible or something, like some of those books, and they'll give those, well, this is exactly what happens, you go to heaven, or whatever it is, for those kind of more religious type books, I guess. And then the science would be like, oh, you just, decompose or whatever it is. You become worm food. And, but I liked it that he just is like, no, I mean, I don't know, but here's some of what people thought, and here's what I think, and, like that last quote, yeah. Like the human, the recognition of...
Did you read it?
Yours? No, this is
the sentence that was
that.
That's right here,
So in chapter 11, Nicholas had in his essay, Becker calls for a recognition of the inherent limits of human understanding and the importance of embracing life's contradictions and mysteries, advocating for a humble approach to the profound questions of existence and meaning. So, it's like he has an approach to those questions that he doesn't really have any definitive answer, and that's one thing I never liked, is the definitive answer about ambiguous questions, I guess, where there's like people have a lot of different answers for it. So that I really like that about the book, where we say maybe it gives you the tools to approach some of these questions that might be anxiety provoking, and so.
Yeah, it is yeah. I'd like to respond to Monty's thing, but first I'll try to make a comment on your perspective. Can't do it. Anyways, back to
that was not concise.
You're fine. No, you're fine, bro. You're fine. I'd like to go back to what Monty talked about. So earlier you mentioned that that this book um something about human existence. It was like it was a good summary or of human
The human condition.
yeah, there we go, the human condition, right? And this is something that I haven't fully processed, because I can see I'm gonna tell you, so I can like directly see this with other people, with like specific other people. um However, I can't, the way that I interpret it for myself and what I assume with others is different. But first, let me talk about how he hit the nail on the head. 1 second. So, um, um, first I'm going to talk about how Becker perfectly describes a significant person in my life. Actually, two. I think there's a third as well, but whatever. Um, which is first my father. So my father is he's an artist. He's a painter. He's an abstract painter. He was born in the 50s. And his parents were Catholic. He went to Catholic school in the 60s and 70s, and completely rejected Catholicism. And then, as I just said, he became a painter. And I think that this example perfectly orchestrates what Becker says about the how modern day culture has substituted the function of religion in a way where my Catholic grandfather's way of fulfilling his immortality quest is through Catholicism, is through Jesus. Whereas in my father, who's um, who's unable to wholeheartedly be a religious man, fulfills his immortality quest through painting. I joke that my grandfather's best friend is Jesus, and my father's best friend is Wassily Kandinsky, who was one of the first abstract painters in the early part of the 20th century, and who is like quite literally an inspiration for my father's work. So that's one example about how Becker really hits the nail on the head. There's also my godmother's husband is also in a similar situation where he's trying to write a book about a lot of about um the relationship that Greek philosophy has with Christianity, and there's a word for it, and gnosis, and how this is his immortality quest, writing this book. So these are two examples about as I said earlier, about how like modern day culture um, fulfills this immortality quest. However, these are two examples, right? I know a lot of people, and so I guess these are two examples that are like in favor of Becker and Monte's perspective as well. However, um, when Monte previously mentioned that this is like the the most insightful book on the human condition, I guess was fair. Um, per, yeah. I've given you two examples of people in my life, right? However, when I think of my relationship with meaning generating um, ideas in the future, I don't perceive them as immortality quests, and more about methods to get a meaningful life, to get motivation, to get something to live for. So my as I just talked about, my father's paint, art, and my godmother's husband's book. the meaning generating systems that I live for is well, one, having a family in the future, right? Having meeting, a woman that I'll call my wife, and having a household with children, and as well as a neighborhood, right? And just important people around us. Not important isn't important to us, right? Not like important like powerful, but like important like to our lives. So that's one way in which I plan on generating meaning, and I guess what Becker would argue is an immortality quest in a way. And the second would be just being a good person within society, like fulfilling my role in a good way, in an interesting manner, right? Kind of like what this is, right? Just being a knowledgeable person, as well as a geographic adventurer, and yeah. So those are three things, right? Those are three things: the future family, being a learned person, and a geographic adventure. However, I don't interpret these three things, these three objectives in a way, as immortality quests. I do see them as like meaning generating systems, but not immortality quests. Um, However, in Becker's work, I don't know. I would posit that Becker would argue that those are that meaning generating things are immortality quests. I don't know. This is where like the definition, right, of a meaningful thing or of an immortality quest should be clear, and I don't have them off the top of my head or even written down anywhere.
I could add something to that.
Oh yeah, go.
Yeah. So you said, so what, remind me again though, you said meaning making. What was that phrase you just said?
Like a meaning making like system.
Like that each person tries to.
Oh, an immortality quest.
Yeah, so Becker calls that a causa sui. So he says that like everyone has that in their life, where it could be a book for your godmother's husband, or in your father's case, it's his life's work, the causa sui. It's like, do you remember what it's called?
For his, that would be a creative project.
Or like, what does causa sui mean? It's like
it's like
force.
the making of oneself, self-generation, the immortality quest.
It's another word, yeah, I guess.
Okay, that's also okay. I probably should have read chapter 5 better.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just because me and him have talked about that word a lot because we think it's a good way to use as like a definition where you know where causa sui is basically what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like everyone has a different causa sui, and like now I forget what I was gonna say about that, but
so causa sui versus meaning generating architectures. So what's the difference between participating in like a larger social immortality quest like a religion versus a self-meaning making architecture?
Yeah, so in like a cultural hero system, like a lot of the time the identities and the causa suis that get laid out are laid out for you. And so, it could be like a doctor, you become a doctor, right? And then that's kind of your life project. That's what gives your life the meaning. You help people, you say, and so that's your causa suis, is to take on the identity of a doctor. But then, for someone like our friend Monte here, who kind of strayed away from the straight and narrow, he has to, and many other people have to make their own. And maybe even your dad could be the same too.
Yeah.
I mean, artist, of course, is like defined by society, but the actual art that he's, and the meaning that he's putting into his art, like that has to come from him. That has to come from within. And
I'd just like to add like a question for you, Nicholas. So from like a sociological level perspective, for you to have to venture out and generate your own meaning, kind of is a comment on your civilization and your society that you're a part of, because you're kind of saying, oh, the system I'm a part of doesn't actually give me a role that I actually find significantly meaningful.
Yeah.
A lot of thinkers have talked, like a lot of modern day thinkers have kind of railed on this, like Jordan Peterson talks about the meaning crisis. There are some other intellectuals that talk about meaning as a crisis. But on a deeper level, the function of the hero system as in to give individuals meaning so that it's like a method of aligning their quote-unquote immortality quests with that of the whatever the civilization finds as the ideal.
Mhm.
So in that you're going out and venturing in terms of creating your own meanings, that's, I think Becker's spoken to that too, as like that's one of the modern existential burdens of man, is we have to kind of generate our own meanings and find some way to do that.
Yeah.
But I would say that is actually part of your own immortality quest. It's just that there's no ready-made one for you, so you need to kind of venture out and build it yourself.
Yeah, maybe my issue is that I just don't fully understand the definition of like what is an immortality quest, right? I don't find myself in a meaning crisis. I mean, I have in the past when I was younger, but I do think I have, like, you know, something to live for, like motivations that yeah, that are inherently meaningful, for lack of a better word, for or deep, right? That's one thing. Darn it, had another comment. Yeah, I forgot. Whatever. And then you guys want to take the mic? I can also.
I had yeah. With Becker does mention, because and you mentioned too. It's really interesting to think of people our age, like early 20s. It's what?
No, it's like when you said it went higher than like any other words.
Oh, really? So, I'll try to do no us or likes. So, no. But, so I was taking a walk the other day, and, so, 200 years ago, you had your hero system laid out for you. You went to work in the fields, you did your stuff for God, you did the 10 Commandments, and then you went to heaven. And that was like a lot of it. There was the other Eastern stuff, but that was like the Western religious Orthodox, or whatever you want to call it. And so, but now, like growing up, being born in the 2000s, as was mentioned earlier, if you don't grow up in a strictly religious family for any religion, you're kind of on your own a lot with these questions. And in the USA, I think that's a majority. It's a lot of, it's a lot of families that or kids that are being born into. They're not given the answers. They're not given the system and the cultural hero system to participate in. So kind of by default, they're set to make up their own meaning, and that's very difficult, I think.
Yeah, I think that well, meaning can be generated in other ways. One thing that I've observed is that people can generate meaning through like political stances, through a quest for justice, right? Which I can see like within my own family.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect where, yeah, like, yeah.
So like fighting for justice becomes like instead of fighting for your Lord and Savior Jesus, you fight for justice, and that's how you like orient your life.
Yeah.
Around
you,
that.
You fight for Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy.
Yeah, yeah.
She's fine.
Or like Roe v. Wade just got overturned, right? So like you put a lot of your life force. If you don't think that should have been overturned, you go and yeah. I think it's tough, and I think it's pretty easy to observe that a lot of that's going on, and I would question whether or not that's a consequence of like secular, I think is the right word, society, where a lot of people are searching for meaning and kind of latch on wherever they can find.
And also it's because the there's a transfer where the constraints on your ethics is based upon the law of the land, which I think didn't exist 4 or 5 centuries ago, where rather than the law was still existed, obviously, but at least us looking back, right? It's not like any of us were there, but like in the 16th century or something, what governed ethics was more a religious aspect, rather than a secular justice facilitated by the government. Yeah. Anyways, I feel like we're getting in a rabbit hole here that I kind of want to I don't know. I kind of want to get out of. If you guys have like things you really want to add, feel free to do so.
Well, Monte, I mean, I have a quote.
Okay, go.
Did you want to say something?
I'll say something after your quote.
I have a quote. So, like, when I first read the book, Becker has a chapter. I don't know what chapter, but he has a quote where it's talking about finding a new beyond. And so that really spoke to me because I grew up, as you might, maybe I said it, but I grew up non-religious. My parents said, hey, we want you to choose, me and my sister. It's like, okay, cool. Like that.
Which is also a crazy thing to ask to a kid, really.
I know. It's like...
Wait, were your grandparents religious?
So, my dad's mom is a Baptist and goes to church every Sunday, but then everyone else, like my mom's mom was Catholic and then left the church to be with my grandpa, so she was Catholic until like 19 or 20. So no, mostly non-religious, and yeah, it's quite the freedom. And then, as I stated, though, it was quite a burden for me to have to kind of, like, when I first started asking these questions about death, and then just like my own meaning and the meaning of my life and life in general, was like, fuck, like I felt kind of, excuse my French, but I felt kind of alone. And like I said, I didn't feel like I could have anyone to talk about it with. I went to go like therapist, and like these guys were, I felt like I didn't have any good conversation with these guys, the guys that were supposed to know about this stuff, right? Like therapists and stuff. That would have been when I was like a teenager. But he talks about finding your new beyond, and then, like we've known people that grew up very religious and then turned out to not like the religion and want to know part of it at like 14, 15. And so it's interesting because, most people will grow up with a certain beyond, a certain framework of what life is. And then at one point, it kind of gets shattered, where like some sort of paradox or something that they don't like, something they don't believe in anymore. And they have to reach for a new beyond. And so he talks about the struggle of that. Like once you get to either the fundamental or like some top of your belief system, you're like, wait a minute, there's more. You have to reach for the new beyond. And that goes back to making your own meaning. Like you could have all the meaning, and then at one point, it could get broken. And to me, that's one of the hardest things that anyone can go through. Where you think you know all this and you think you're all smart, and then you come across something that kind of shatters your belief system, we'll call it. And you got to work to find something to replace it, or learn about something you didn't know that you could build on top of it. And I think Becker gives, I can't quote any right now, but he gives some good. He just really gives some good approaches to how to do that. And I don't know, Becker felt like a friend when I was reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
He felt like my friend, and he had some humor. If you haven't read the book, he has some humor in there too, and he's just a funny guy, but a brilliant guy, and it feels like he's either your dad or like your best friend. And yeah, I know I've struggled a lot, and I just wanted to say that it's helped me. So
Yeah, so some concluding thoughts from my end. What's coming to mind is I really like women, right? Women are beautiful, but I have to balance that out. And Becker kind of called me out when I was being more of a centralist, and basically my meaning structure was basically the feedback loop of attention and affection from women. And there's a nice chapter in there about the romantic solution. Basically how you're just being a Don Juan, so you don't actually have to face your existential load. And he kind of called me out hyper directly there.
That's somebody else to face that load.
What?
No. It's load talk. Never mind.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah,
And
so
he talks about how this kind of people use various mechanisms to avoid
facing their own mortality hyper directly, whether that be through escapatory relationships or through adopting a maladaptive social role that your culture lays out for you, but actually isn't in service to life and the life force, as Becker would say. So this gave me the tools to kind of analyze my own areas of falling short. But then it also gave me the tools to objectively analyze where the various hero systems of society and civilization are falling short. If your civilization says something is heroic, well, you can actually sincerely ask that in like an objective framework, as into like, okay, when this is held as heroic, what is the full like stack of consequences of that? And while that's a complex question to explore, it's I think it's going to be needed. And anybody
I have a question for you.
who I'd want to defer to for like leadership, I'd want to be a well analyzed man, and have these insights and have read Becker. So an easy way to earn my respect is reading Becker. And Nicholas, you've done that, so thank you. You now have my respect. Like, not that you didn't before, but like deeply. I appreciate it.
So when you mentioned objectively looking at those sorts of things, like I remember you had read the book and then you started to do some deep dives into religion, and you said that this book helped you kind of do exactly what you just said, is kind of identify what their hero system is for how they want people to behave and act, right? So can you speak a little bit about that, with how it's given you a good framework to approach and look at how religions actually act, or how religions are formulated, the different ones in society? Would you talk a little bit about that? Maybe just vaguely.
Yeah, so I remember when I was a kid, I was sitting in church, and they were talking about like immortality in heaven, and I guess my like biological predisposition raised up. I wasn't very well indoctrinated because it was only a Methodist church. It wasn't like Catholic or anything. So a mix of predisposition and failure of indoctrination. That had me pop up, and I was like, wait, why not pursue life in both this life and whatever concept of the next life there is? And then it really always stuck with me, like, oh, these people are like the Christian people. They're pursuing the next world as a way to kind of take attention off of the complexities of this world. And this was something that I believe Becker directly talks about. I believe that's actually a chapter, like a part of a chapter in there, is basically how that Christian faith works. Rank talks about it too. But in terms of being able to objectively analyze like these hero systems, these coordination mechanisms, Becker's work is great for that. You can see kind of like, okay, here's the in a simple term, you can ask, how does the religion kind of declare that your life is going, how does it tell you that your immortality project is successful? There's a few different mechanisms of that. There's faith, where it's like faith in an afterlife, where if you get into heaven, you have eternal bliss. But then there's also some more biological means of continuing after your death. So that's like a family structure. And the modern kind of perverse implementation of these coordination dynamics and immortality quests that Becker talks about is, how does your bank account function to live on after you die, so you give wealth to the next generation. I got a little lost there. Is there a clarifying remark you have to add?
So I just remember, like, a couple of times we would like me and you would talk about religion, and you would say how, and it goes exactly with what you said, is how the cultural hero systems very synonymous with religion back in the day, and how modern day culture is, you know, if you objectively look at it, they're very, very, very similar. Even if one doesn't have a god or an afterlife, they're very similar in providing the roles that, from like a top down, that the system wants to have within the system, like the roles it wants within the system. And those roles would be the different heroic
Mhm.
things one can do. You can do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
like winning the Super Bowl,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the hero for the year.
If you're a Super Bowl winning quarterback, you're a goddamn hero.
Yeah.
And
Or him being on your team.
or if he's on your fantasy or whatever it is. Yeah. So it just stuck out to me when you said you can objectively look. So then you can look and say, well, what really is that heroic for? And you can start to look at all the different roles and identities and what Becker calls character armor, which Nicholas touched on in his essay, where you look at the different traits that people have and say, well, where do these traits come from? And you can really start to see and look at where the traits come from. And then if you can start to see where the traits come from, at least for yourself, you can say, well, this trait actually isn't going to do me any good. So even though it's laid out to be heroic in whatever system it is, it's not something that you feel is heroic to you based on some sort of analysis.
What you can do is you can ask, is this identity actually in service to life? Why or why not?
Yeah.
And then you can do the analysis of that.
Do you mean life in general, or do you mean your life? The individual's life.
It's a little complex, but like your life in service to life as a whole. So in general, let's say, for simplicity's sake.
Okay. Yeah.
So, at some point in the book, Becker lists 3 ways in which are common approaches.
Yeah.
For I wouldn't say they're immortality quests. I would say they're methods in which we avoid looking at death in the eye.
Yes.
The first one is religion. The second one, which is I think common nowadays, especially for our age, is drugs and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one, which was less intuitive for me, is being a busybody.
Mm-hmm.
With inundating your life with the trivial manners of I don't know, fucking taxes or something, right?
Shopping.
And that's one thing that stuck out to me from Becker's book. Are there any particular chapters that you guys would like to talk about? In general, or here you can.
I got one.
You can also look at the chapters right here.
So,
If,
shit, I'll talk. Yeah. So, yeah.
No. So one thing that stuck out to me was chapter 3. As well as chapter 4. Chapter 3 is the recasting of some basic psychoanalytic ideas. And chapter 4, I think it's specifically chapter 4, a human character as a vital lie, where I had never interpreted the development of character traits as repression mechanisms to deny the reality of their situation.
Yes.
Now, and again, I don't think I have a clear definition of what a character trait is. I think I have like an intuitive definition of what a character trait is, but I don't think that's the type of character trait that Becker is talking about in his work. But that was a new way for me to think about character traits. The really shift my. Do you guys have any comments on that particular part of Becker's book?
So just real quickly, what sticks out to me when you mention character traits is you can do like a whole deep dive in terms of, on a sociological level, how do individuals calculate what behavior is adaptive, and it's very efficient for societies in both like a coordination standpoint to actually offer individual character traits and social roles, so that way everybody doesn't have to compute adaptive behavior locally. But when you just take out whatever social role is handed to you, you're not looking at the human condition for yourself. You're not looking at the man's existential nature and solving it for yourself. So in that way, it can be a repression mechanism or a denial. But but you have to look at the virtuous side of it's a good coordination mechanism, but it's also denial. So can we offer social roles that allow the benefit of expedient and effective coordination that are in service to life, so that there actually is no denial taking place. Whereas if you were to look the human condition full on in the face, would you be doing the same thing? That would be pretty cool to see, because then it's just better coordination.
Yeah, yeah. To add on that from a human coordination aspect, as Becker states, if everyone was just thinking about death 24/7, we wouldn't get anything done. We'd all be mad and insane. And so those social roles and those character traits, and he calls it character armor, that do act as repression mechanisms. And just also to point out, this book talks about psychoanalysis, and I didn't know really about psychoanalysis before the book, but I think that's a really good movement and kind of has a lot of ideas that are good to know. But so the character armor, it's like a paradox because you need it for coordination of society, but it doesn't work for some people because they break it down and they do exactly what has been said, where it doesn't work for them or they see it as not heroic or whatever it is. And then that's when, you have to reach to the new beyond, or you have to do some of your own computation to see what would actually be heroic, because what has been provided for you feel is not a character trait or a set of character traits that you want to have, even if those character traits work for a lot of other people.
Or that are truly in service to life. There may be a discrepancy between the character traits offered, like the character armor, or the social identities offered to you, and what life it actually needs of you.
So would you say that a lot of the character armor or character traits provided might fall short of someone's ideals, and thus they feel, it kind of tears them down because what is offered to them in action they believe is not enough for their own ideals, and thus they either have to come up with new ones or they kind of just fall into an abyss of not knowing what to do. What would you say about that?
Yeah, so ideals is one way to phrase this, but I really take a biological perspective. There would be a stable strategy for civilization. Like, we play a lot of Civ on the computer, like Sid Meier's Civilization 5 and 6, right? Just from a pragmatic biological perspective, is if the set of social identities that are offered to you do actively or not addressing a given pragmatic problem that the world faces or that you face or your community faces, then the claim of these systems as to offer heroic identity when they're actively falling short as a whole, that's going to be a large source of cognitive dissonance, and that's what and when people don't have the tools to actually acknowledge that, then that's what drives kind of being an outcast, I guess, where you can't find a social role. Yeah. I believe Becker talks about that as the schizophrenic, using the older definition of that.
So Nicholas, I agree with that. I have a question for you now.
Mm-hmm.
So you've read this for the first time, not the whole thing you said, but a good amount of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about what your favorite quote was, or your favorite idea. Mm-hmm. Would you say that? Well, I guess first off, did you think this book had what it had in it based on me and Monte talking about it, or mainly him talking about it? Because I think for me, when he first mentioned it, I'll just say I wasn't quite sure what to expect. Obviously, I thought it would be about death because of the title, but I was not aware of the other stuff that was in there. And he mentions Camus, and he mentions all these other people that a lot of people I think are familiar with if they're into philosophy at all or anything. But what would you say after just fresh off the first read?
So I think I already knew about the thesis of the book. Okay. However, the specifics, specifically on the psychoanalysis part of it, I did catch me off guard. I remember in chapter 3, the stuff about anal play and
You mean the making of a philosopher?
Yeah, the making of a philosopher. That, as well as other I guess traditionally ideas that are traditional that are associated with early psychoanalysis with Freud, that I didn't really know what to make of it. So that's one aspect. Um, the the general position about us as humans being like acutely aware of our own mortality is something that I did expect. There were also like other parts of but yeah, but like much of the detail, especially in like part two, such as like in chapter 7 when he talks about um the motive, the desires that individuals have to merge with something greater or to individuate, that caught me off guard. Or or when he talks about um substituting God with like your romantic partner and like praising them in the same way. That's like again just the detail that I wasn't waiting. That they caught me off guard. Um, yeah, I don't know if I was really expecting a type of like solution to this. I don't think I was, nor am I surprised that he doesn't. Yeah, so there we go.
What do you mean by solution? I'm a little confused here.
Just like a way to like proposing a way to tackle this problem. Well, rather
How would you face the problem?
just like how to what are optimal ways to deal with our death anxiety. Yeah.
He ends with, the most that any one of us can seem to do is to fashion something, an object or ourselves, and drop it into the confusion, make an offering of it, so to speak, to the life force. So, I took that as a solution. Just offering yourself to be in service to life is the general solution there. Where you kind of have to figure out what that means in the case by case. But
Okay. All right. I think this is like a good time to end the podcast.
yeah, so
Do you guys have stuff to add as final words?
Yeah, so I think I've asked you to read this book since probably ever since we started becoming friends.
Yeah.
And you finally read it.
Yes.
Can you see why?
I mean,
Did it did it hit home for you? Or?
I wouldn't like outstandingly say like yes. It was an experience, a memorable experience, and I understand. Yeah. So it was a memorable experience, and I do understand why you like it. And it did like touch upon intuitions that I had about the religiosity of man, the inherent religiosity of man, which I did find deeply interesting. As I said earlier, I while I do see I think when I look at my father or my godmother's husband, I do think like Becker hit it home. It like explains their situation, but I am having trouble relating it to just like the general, just like me, or just like the general population in general. Like but yeah, it was a noteworthy piece of work that I will remember.
thank you for reading it.
Yeah, I also, as Monte said earlier, I also think it's one of the best books anyone can read if they're having any sort of existential crises or existential angst, or they're not sure what to do, not sure what to think. They've reached that point. So while I don't think the book is for everyone, I do think it's definitely one of the best books I've ever read. So I think it's one of those books that you can always go to. So yeah.
And yeah, it's a book you can always go to and reread.
because it'll always call you out for some other form of repression that is giving you problems in real life. Would you recommend this to our other friends to have them read it too, now that you've read it?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah. Anyways, thank you for joining us. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.